Hello, welcome to Actual Spinster. My name is Anna Marie and blah blah blah. Before I get into the video, there is a link in the description box to a GoFundMe to support Alla and her family. If you could check that out, I would be grateful. Today's video is going to be about books that I read basically in April, although I will mention some. Shall I start with one? No, I'll end maybe with the ones that I'm currently reading, but I have been reading for a while. I didn't make a reading wrap up for the month before this one, which is March, because I did not read anything, which was really sad, and I've been having a bad time, and normally that is indicated by not reading things. I mean, I read things, I guess, I just didn't finish anything, which I don't know how long has happened. Like, that hasn't happened for a long time, I think, for a whole month. That was crazy. But I did finally read some things in April, so that's good. Yeah, I'll just talk to you about them. I don't think I'll talk in super depth. So the first book that I finally finished was a Discworld book by Terry Pratchett, and that's Moving Pictures. I actually buddy read this with one of my friends. Unfortunately, we read it for, like, it did take us a while to read, and it's partially because we had a really nice time, like, reading chunks out loud to each other, which was really nice. But it also meant that we read this along, like, a crazy time period that, you know, you didn't need for this book. And this is about, like, a Discworld take on the development of Hollywood. And it's all kind of basically a sort of elaborate pun, you know, like, it's about Hollywood, and that's fine. And some parts are, like, genuinely funny, and, like, I did enjoy it, but it's just, like, it's a book that you should read faster than we did, because it's one long kind of pun, basically. Yeah, like, there was, like, some things I enjoyed in it. It's a Terry Pratchett. I do really enjoy these, but it just, yeah, it was, like, it ended up feeling like it dragged, even though it probably didn't. It's just because we read it over a long period of time, you know? It's also a very early Discworld book, which I guess I hadn't quite realised until we started reading it. Like, they all have lots of names, but some of the wizards in this, suddenly you're like, wait, what? And then it's partially because they're, like, sort of still being, like, developed into different characters and stuff throughout the series. I think this is, like, the 10th, so it's really, really early. What else is there to say? Not much. Not much. The next book I read almost in the exact opposite way to Moving Pictures, which is The Free People's Village by Sim Khan, which I read really pretty fast. Like, I read it probably in, like, 4 days, but basically the majority of reading was done on 2 days. And I'll show you, like, this really lovely design, because it's sort of like a protest novel, I guess. So the dust jacket folds out as a poster. Save the 8th is, like, a big thing. Have I managed to show this off properly? Hopefully. And then this is what the inside looks like also. Bunny Bloodlust is, like, a punk band in the, or, like, a post-punk band in the book. Oh, there's also, like, a map kind of thing here on the end pages. So it is a really nicely published book and published edition. Yeah, like, I really wanted to love this book, but I just, like, didn't, unfortunately. I just had, like, a lot of issues with it, like, not necessarily in the sense of its politics, although there is, like, one character. I mean, it does feel like, you know, there's lots of sort of, like, teaching moments with characters, and, like, the main character is this, like, white girl called Maddie, and she's kind of like the entry point into this particular world, which is basically our world, but, like, you know, slightly different. And she, so there's just, like, a lot of sort of her, I don't know, like, yeah, there was the one part of it that I felt like I genuinely kind of wanted more of and thought could be, like, really enjoyable, and just kind of, like, interesting, was that Maddie, she's a teacher, and at one point she reads Pedagogy of the Oppressed, which I actually haven't read still, but I do, you know, want to, and it is obviously this, like, seminal book about, like, yeah, about the way that teaching and schooling reinforces, like, oppressive norms, but also maybe ways that you can kind of counteract that. Although I don't think it's, like, anyway, like I said, I haven't read it myself, but it's, like, really, you know, famous, and I would like to read it one day. It's just so many books to read. But yeah, at one point she's, like, given this book by a character who's this, like, black trans guy, and he is probably the most radical voice in this, and then she thinks much more critically and interestedly and kind of engagedly about her position as a teacher in this classroom, and she teaches in a predominantly black, like, neighborhood in Houston. Suddenly I'm second guessing myself about that, but I'm pretty sure that is correct. And Yeah, but anyway, the point is, what's this book about, Anna Marie? Talk about it properly. Basically this is set in well, I would say also this is one thing that I thought was like genuinely like the best part of it was the like premise. So this is set in an alternative 2020 or so, that basically the divergence point from our like 2020 is that Al Gore won the election in 2004 instead of Bush. Was it 2004? Like early 2000s. And that means that there has been some attendance to climate change, and Al Gore supposedly in this like designated like a war on climate change as opposed to like a war on terror. But of course like a war on climate change becomes sort of the same thing as the war on terror, but I felt like it was like kind of astute in how it like represented what the world might look like, because you know it wasn't like and therefore we have dealt with climate change. It was like all of the like issues and social dynamics of disprivilege, what's the word, you know, whatever, terrible descriptions here, like they are kind of the same, they're just all now greenwashed also. Which obviously we do have like a taste of here, but like even more so there's like a bureau for carbon credits, and you know you get like tax cuts for like various carbon like supportive choices, but that also means that if you're rich you don't get penalized for behavior that obviously is not like green. Whereas if you're poor and you can't like constantly upgrade your house, which you obviously shouldn't be doing anyway if you want to be green, but you know, you get penalized and have to pay more tax and like stuff like this. So yeah, I thought that was kind of interesting. I found like a lot of the gender stuff really like facile, honestly, and like I don't know, I really wanted to like this book. I just didn't. I struggled with it. And yeah, the one thing I can say about it is that it's pretty readable. And like I just kind of fled through it, that's not quite the word, sped through it, there we go. There are some content warnings I would definitely say. This I don't think has been read by enough people on Storygraph to have like generated the content warnings like notification that it shows for me, because I have like things flagged that I say that I don't want to read, but it's more like I just want to know if I'm going to read about them, and then sometimes I guess I don't want to read about them, it just depends. And so it didn't mark that for me, so I did have like a bit of a tough time, and I don't really want to think about that aspect of the book very much, especially because I also just don't really think the whole thing is like handled particularly well, and I think like the gender dynamics of it is just like, yeah, I don't know, I just was like not convinced. And I do think that writing like a kind of movement, protest, collective novel is difficult, especially if you are writing it from the perspective of like the least radical, least like educated and like awakened person. Because like to some degree Maddie does have like an awakening, but it's also very like at points it feels both contrived, and then at points it feels like her lack of awakening is actually what's contrived. Yeah, I don't know, there's quite a lot of police brutality in this. It did make me like even more reflect on how much I love this little book, Metabolized If Able by Clay Add, which is also kind of like a protest social movement novel, but it's just like so good. And just like so beautifully well done, and like it's much more interesting I think and clever about gender stuff, and just better, you know, it's just better. I'm sorry, I'm really sorry. I'll stop trash talking this book, and I am really sorry for not liking it. There's also just some like deeply unbelievable stuff in this, but you know it's not necessarily like such a bad thing, because novels don't have to all be like realistic, but I did just think some of it was like, really, that punk is the one who's done this stuff? I don't believe that. The next novel is House of Many Ways by Diana Wynne Jones, which this is actually like the sort of third technically book in the Howl's Moving Castle series. I think in like an unhaul maybe I talked about the second book that I did have, which is called Castle in the Air or something, and I decided to unhaul that one because I didn't want to read it, partially because I had read reviews of like people talking about how it was like had a lot of fat phobia in, and I just was like, I don't need this. And the way that these like sequels work, I believe, at least now having read this, I would definitely say that's true. And I think Castle in the Air has even less of Sophie and Howl, but I could be wrong. But like, you know, they're not, like you don't really, like obviously you get better background stuff if you have read Howl's Moving Castle, and obviously out of this series, it is the best book, so you should obviously read that one if you're interested in this. But you don't need to have read them to like get the novel. Like this centers on like a different main character whose name is Charmaine, and it's about Charmaine, who is, I don't really know how old she's supposed to be, like a young girl, like teenage girl. She's definitely below the age of 18 because there's like comments about that. And it's about her going to look after her like great uncle, or at least like a great something relation, William Norland, his house, whilst he's ill and he's a wizard. And of course, the house is kind of a special magical wizard house. I did think this was like pretty, like especially in comparison, I think, with Howl's Moving Castle, although I did read it a long time ago, so maybe I'm wrong. It was just a lot more kind of like, I don't know if immature is the right word, but it just felt a lot more kind of very simplistic children's story, as opposed to, I feel like Howl's Moving Castle had a bit more depth. But this was still like fine. There were points where I got a bit bored and I was like, do I really want to read this? But then, you know, like I've been having a bad time and it was kind of like a nice sort of, what's the word? Escape, I guess, in a way. And there's some crazy stuff with Howl, in my opinion, in this, which I guess I won't say. And I was like, I did like enjoy seeing Sophie again, so that was nice. Although she's not like super part of it, and you know, I think also like the storyline is very sort of obvious. Like even if Charmaine doesn't really know what's going on, like the reader always does basically. But I think like this does presume that you would have read the first book, so I don't know. I feel like I'm being really negative, but I read it and I did enjoy it at points especially, and like I do think there's like a whimsicalness to it, and like some of it is almost sweet, should we say, and I do like how Charmaine like really loves reading, and that's like a big thing in this, although yeah, she's also been brought up to be respectable by her mother, and so she thinks that that means that Charmaine shouldn't be able to know how to like do laundry or wash up or cook. There's also some kobolds in this who were enjoyable. Yeah, I don't know, like it's fine. I think the sort of like overarching plot is just like a bit meh, and then there are like fun instances, and then it's nice whenever Sophie and Howl, with an asterisk next to his name, show up or like are there. Yeah, I don't know. There's also some like cute dog stuff in here, so if you're looking for like dogs in fantasy novels, there's a good dog for that in here, I would say. Okay, those were the 3 books that I read in April. I mean, technically April finishes in like 2 days from now, 3 days from now. How many days does April have? Doesn't matter. And so I guess I could technically finish maybe one thing I'll show you, but I do not think that's going to happen. And I'm like, yeah, but I did think I would show you some of the things that I have been currently reading, partially because I made a spring TBR and they are on my spring TBR. And yeah, this one I have been reading like since March, I think. And that's The Witch of Edmonton by Thomas Dekker, John Ford and William Rowley. I guess I'm like halfway through, and this is like an early modern play. I think I said the wrong date from when it was from in the video I made about it. I think this is later. Yeah, I think it says in here that it was written in 1621, around then. So yeah, and I am like enjoying it. I'm just like too tired and stalled on this, and I just need to like get back into it, I think. But this tells the story of kind of like a community. Whilst it is called The Witch of Edmonton, and so it is about this one particular woman called Mother Sawyer, who has been kind of designated and then sort of as a result of that becomes a witch, or I guess that's my kind of take on it. And I do think this is a really fascinating play from the perspective of thinking about the construction of witches in society, which obviously is quite sort of a modern look about like witch fear and paranoia and like witch trials, in the sense that modern people tend to look back on the past thinking that the accusations were like completely foundless. They were based off of like other things, like other social like sort of realities, like age, deformity, precarity, poverty, just like also jealousy and things like that. And this play kind of does say that that is sort of what is going on, whilst also saying witchcraft is real. And there is a dog familiar. I've talked about it before, so I'm really like fascinated by the dog familiar in this, who speaks and says, you know, "Oh, have I found thee cursing?" Yeah, it is really interesting. It's definitely the kind of reading that I need to like have my brain kind of really on and be able to like be up for. So I have kind of stalled as a result of that too. But yeah, because like Mother Sawyer says this in the play, which again is just really fascinating to me. And why on me? Why should the envious world throw all their scandalous malice upon me? Because I am poor, deformed and ignorant, and like a bow buckled and bent together by some more strong in mischiefs than myself. Must I for that be made a common sink, for all the filth and rubbish of men's tongues to fall and run into? Some call me witch, and being ignorant of myself, they go about to teach me how to be one, urging that my bad tongue, by their bad usage made so, forespeaks their cattle, doth bewitch their corn, themselves, their servants, and their babes at nurse. This they enforce upon me, and in part make me to credit it. Fascinating stuff. At least I think. But yeah, hopefully I will finish this in the next month. The other book that I've been reading, I mean, I have also been like reading a bunch of other things and not finishing them, but I thought I would like highlight this because I think I am going to try and read at least a chunk of it next month also, and this also was on my spring TBR, but that's Keynotes and Discords by George Edgerton. I have read 3 stories in this. The other reason is I thought that we could do a dice roll to see which story I read next, because this has been part of my like short story reading project, where I have this collection of 10 short stories that are on my TBR, which I have picked out. Every month I'm trying to read 1 short story, so depending on how I feel about like if I'm drawn to a particular collection. If I'm not, I'll roll a d10 to see which collection, and then I'll roll another dice to pick a story unless I have like a particular feeling about which one I want to read from that collection. And so I've been doing that system to read some various things. I made a video, so I'll like link so you can see the other collections that are in the little challenge thing. And yeah, this one I have read 3 stories from so far, and I've been really enjoying them. I think they're like really beautifully written. There's something very like contemporary about them in a way, but they're not too sort of overly descriptive, but they're also very like insightful, I guess I want to say, or like really interesting about subjectivity, and also very interesting for me about gender. These are Victorian stories, they're from the 1890s. So not just gender too, that's what's really interesting to me, is there also been a lot about class, which is also something I think is big to say nothing. But I think especially in stuff about gender, there's often a focus on middle class women as being like the centers of what gendered experience is, or at least what being a woman is. And I think that's the same with like lots of criticism that kind of considers women's writings, women's stories, especially in the past. But this intrigues me a lot because it's been very explicit about like class and work and women, at least from the 3 that I've read so far, but also romance, just like a lot of really interesting stuff. So let's see how many I have left. I think I am probably going to roll a d20, but let's just count, because even if I get a number that I have already read of this, I'll just roll again. Okay, I think there's 16 if I've counted correctly, but yeah, so I'm going to roll a d20, and if I get like above a 16, then I'll just re-roll. Let's use my lesbian d20, which looks like this. Okay, I got Wedlock. Yeah, it's not technically the 13th story in this collection, but like I've read the one that would be considered 13, so I just counted. So that, I think, is what I will read next. Or I might just start with the first story in this collection, which is called Across Line and is the most famous one by George Edgerton. I mean, I'm hoping to read more than just one story, but like I guess the one that I rolled will be the one that like I count for my challenge of like reading a short story, and then but if I don't read it and I read Across Line, that's fine too, but hopefully I'll read both is the point. Hopefully I'll read more than both, because it would be good to make some progress in this, especially because I actually do find it really useful context as well for some of my PhD work as well, but that's not primarily why I'm reading this. Okay, I think that's sort of everything that I had to talk about today. Definitely let me know if you read House of Many Ways or The Free People's Village and like your thoughts on them. I'd really love to hear. I feel like Diana Wynne Jones is like an author that I really want to love, and I never do quite, but I do enjoy her work. It's just like it doesn't quite get to like this is 100% fantastic 5 stars, which I feel like it has the potential to do, or like it could, or like I wish it could, but it just doesn't seem to like quite get there for me. But yeah, I think that's everything I had to talk about today. I hope you're having a good day when you're watching this, and I will talk to you when I next talk to you. Bye!